Every choice we make, from the mundane to the monumental, is guided by an invisible scaffolding of beliefs, values, and assumptions, whether we acknowledge them or not. Philosophy is not confined to dusty textbooks or abstract debates. It lives in the grocery store aisle, the voting booth, and the quiet moments before we speak. Even the refusal to engage with philosophy is itself a philosophical stance, one that often goes unexamined, leaving us vulnerable to the currents of culture, tradition, or sheer inertia. Consider the act of tipping a server. Is it a moral obligation, a social contract, or a relic of exploitative labor practices? The answer depends on the philosophical framework silently governing your judgment. Utilitarians might calculate the greatest good, the ontologists might appeal to duty, and egoists might weigh personal benefit. Yet few pause to trace these threads back to their origins, let alone question whether their framework serves them, or if they serve it. This disconnect between thought and action is where philosophy exerts its quietest, most pervasive influence. The Stoics taught resilience through focus on what one can control. Existentialists forged meaning in a seemingly indifferent universe. Confucians harmonized individual and communal flourishing. These traditions are not relics, but living toolkits, offering strategies for modern dilemmas like digital alienation, climate anxiety, or the erosion of trust. To dismiss them as academic navel-gazing is to disarm oneself in a world teeming with complexity. In an age of algorithmic manipulation and fractured truths, such self-awareness is not a luxury but a survival skill. The unseen framework will shape us regardless. The choice is whether we shape it first. The bustling streets of ancient Rome were a crucible of chaos. Political betrayals, plagues, and the ever-looming scepter of war. Yet from this turmoil emerged a philosophy of unshakable calm. Stoicism, practiced by emperors like Marcus Aurelius and slaves like Epictetus, was not about suppressing emotion, but mastering perception, transforming adversity into fuel for wisdom. At its core lay a radical premise. While we cannot control external events, we retain absolute sovereignty over our judgments and actions. Imagine a modern commuter trapped in gridlock, their frustration mounting with each minute wasted. The Stoic response begins with a simple question. Does raging against traffic alter its course? The answer, obvious yet often ignored, reveals the futility of resisting the uncontrollable. Instead, Stoicism trains the mind to pivot inward, asking, how can I use this moment? Perhaps to listen to an audiobook, reflect on the day ahead, or practice patience, a virtue in short supply. This mental refraining, known as the art of acquiescence, turns obstacles into opportunities, a technique harnessed by Navy SEALs and CEOs alike. Yet, Stoicism's power extends beyond mere coping mechanisms. It cultivates moral clarity. When faced with a colleague's betrayal, the Stoic doesn't default to outrage, but interrogates their own expectations. Did I assume fairness where none was guaranteed? Such introspection dissolves victimhood and exposes the hidden arrogance of assuming the universe owes us kindness. Marcus Aurelius captured this in his Meditations. The cucumber is bitter? Then throw it away. Are there brambles in the path? Then go around. You needn't say, why do such things exist? This pragmatism, devoid of whining, is the antithesis of modern Greece's culture. Critics often mistake Stoicism for emotional detachment, a robotic denial of human feeling. Nothing could be further from the truth. The Stoics wept for lost loved ones and celebrated joys, but with a caveat. They refused to let passion override principle. Seneca, writing to a grieving friend, acknowledged sorrow's inevitability while warning against drowning in it. This balanced approach mirrors modern cognitive behavioral therapy, which identifies irrational beliefs to temper destructive emotions. The goal was never numbness but lucidity, a mind clear enough to choose virtue even in the storm. The true test of Stoicism lies not in theory but in the furnace of lived experience. Consider the entrepreneur whose startup collapses overnight. The unexamined response might spiral into self-pity or blame, but the Stoic asks, what remains within my power? Perhaps to analyze failures, rebuild with sharper insight, or even pivot to a new path. This isn't cold optimism, but deliberate agency, a reclaiming of narrative control. As Epictetus, born a slave, taught, circumstances don't make the man, they reveal him. To practice Stoicism today is not to don a toga, but to engage in mental discipline, the daily gym for the mind. Keep a journal, not of complaints, but of judgments. Why did X disturb me? Was my reaction proportional? And when chaos strikes, borrow Marcus Aurelius' mantra, this is what I was trained for. The result isn't perfection, but progress, a gradual alignment of thought and action. In a culture addicted to distraction and outrage, Stoicism offers something radical, the quiet mastery of oneself. The ancient world's two great ethical traditions, the Hebrew Bible and Greek philosophy, emerged from vastly different cultures, yet their moral insights converge with startling harmony. Where the prophets thundered against injustice with divine authority, Aristotle dissected virtue with clinical precision, but both arrived at the same conclusion. A life well lived demands courage, temperance, and justice. This alignment suggests a universal grammar of ethics, one that transcends the sacred-secular divide and speaks to something innate in human flourishing. To pit Athens against Jerusalem, as some theologians have, is to ignore their shared blueprint for moral architecture. Consider the parallel treatment of humility. The Book of Proverbs declares, "Pride goes before destruction," while Socrates, the gadfly of Athens, famously claimed wisdom began with admitting ignorance. Both traditions recognized hubris as the root of folly. The warning echoed in modern psychology's findings on the Dunning-Kruger effect. Similarly, the biblical command to love your neighbor as yourself finds its secular counterpart in Aristotle's philia, pacific friendship binding communities. These are not mere coincidences, but evidence of ethical truths distilled through separate yet equally rigorous lexes. The convergence deepens in their practical guidance for daily life. A Stoic emphasis on controlling one's reactions mirrors Ecclesiastes' admonition against anger. Do not be quickly provoked in your spirit, for anger resides in the lap of fools. Even the seemingly austere Ten Commandments reveal a pragmatic core, rules designed not to constrain, but to preserve societal trust, much like Plato's vision of justice in the Republic. Both frameworks understood that ethics without application are hollow, which is why they embedded moral lessons in parables, the Good Samaritan, and dialectics, the Socratic method, ensuring wisdom was not just taught, but lived. Yet the differences in tone and method are equally instructive. Biblical ethics often appeal to the heart through narrative and commandment, stirring moral imagination with stories of David's repentance or Ruth's loyalty. Greek philosophy, by contrast, appeals to the mind, constructing logical arguments for virtue as the golden mean between extremes. This duality, pathos and logos, offers a holistic approach modern ethics often lacks, marrying emotional resonance with intellectual rigor. To dismiss either tradition is to amputate half of humanity's moral heritage. The modern world, fractured by relativism and ideological tribalism, desperately needs this synthesis. When secular humanists reduce morality to utilitarian calculus, they discard the prophetic fire that ignites reform. When religious fundamentalists reject reason, they abandon the tools to test their own convictions. The biblical and Greek traditions together provide a corrective, ethics grounded in both transcendent truth and human reason. As the philosopher Maimonides, who bridged these worlds, argued, true wisdom demands the ear that hears with the fear of God and the intellect that analyzes with the clarity of Aristotle. Reclaiming this shared legacy begins with recognizing that moral progress has never been the monopoly of one tradition. The abolition of slavery, the expansion of human rights, and the very concept of dignity owe debts to both biblical imperatives and Enlightenment ideals. To walk the shared path is not to dilute either tradition, but to strengthen our ethical foundations, building, as the Apostle Paul wrote, with gold, silver, and precious stones, yet testing each material, as the Greeks taught, with reason's fire. The result is an ethics neither dogmatic nor rootless, but enduring. The ancient Chinese sage, Xuanqi, Once dreamed he was a butterfly, fluttering carefree, unaware of his human self, only to awaken unsure whether he was a man who had dreamed of a butterfly, or a butterfly now dreaming of being a man. This parable, often dismissed as mere poetic whimsy, cuts to the heart of Taoist wisdom, the illusion of fixed identities and the liberation found in embracing fluidity. Where Western philosophy often seeks to define, categorize, and assert control, Xuanqi invites us to dissolve the boundaries between self and world, to dance with uncertainty rather than conquer it. In an age obsessed with rigid self-branding and ideological certitude, his teachings offer a radical antidote: the art of letting go. Consider the modern obsession with finding oneself, a quest that assumes identity is a static treasure to be unearthed, polished, and defended. Xuanqi would scoff at this rigidity, likening it to a river insisting on its own banks rather than flowing. His philosophy revels in transformation. The butcher whose blade never dulls because he follows the natural grooves of the ox, the tree deemed useless by loggers that thrives unbothered, the cripple who laughs at society's pity, freed from the tyranny of conventional beauty. These stories aren't metaphors but manuals for living, challenging the very metrics by which we measure success and worth. To cling to any single identity, parent, professional, patriot, is to suffocate the multiplicity of cells we contain, like insisting a river remain ice when it longs to be mist. The Taoist concept of Wu Wei, often mistranslated as non-action, is not passivity but effortless action, like a sailboat harnessing the wind, rather than rowing against it. Modern life, with its cult of hustle and hyper-agency, treats exhaustion as a virtue, mistaking struggle for significance. Xuanqi's counter is simple. Observe the heron, poised by the pond, striking only when the fish arrives. The archer who hits the target by forgetting the target. The musician whose finest performance arises when the self vanishes into the music. This is not mysticism, but practical psychology. The state athletes call the zone, where effort and awareness merge into flow. The paradox? The tighter we grip the reins of control, the more life slips through our fingers. Yet Xuanqi's most subversive insight concerns suffering itself. Where Stoicism teaches resilience through rational detachment, and Buddhism prescribes extinguishing desire, Xuanqi proposes something startling: joy in the absurd. When his wife dies, he drums and sings, not from callousness, but because he sees her as part of an endless cycle, like the season's march, where mourning would be as misplaced as lamenting the fall of leaves. This isn't nihilism, but a profound trust in the Tao, the nameless rhythm of existence that transcends human labels of good or bad. Modern therapy encourages reframing adversity. Xuanqi goes further, dissolving the frame entirely, asking us to question whether we've mistaken our self-made cages for the sky. Critics might argue this philosophy breeds apathy, a license to shrug at injustice or avoid responsibility. But Xuanqi's humor and humility reveal the opposite. Only by releasing dogma can we act with true spontaneity and compassion. The bureaucrat obsessed with the rules cannot adapt to unique circumstances. The ideologue blinded by doctrine cannot see the humanity before them. Like the fisherman who cuts his net rather than fight the storm, Xuanqi's wisdom lies in discerning when to resist and when to yield, a balance our polarized era desperately needs. The butterfly does not debate its wings, it simply flies. To practice Xuanqi today is to cultivate what the poet Haruka called living the questions, not as a temporary cause before answers, but as a permanent orientation to mystery. Start small. Next time you're stuck in traffic, imagine yourself as a cloud, drifting. When criticized, picture the words as birdsong, neither personal nor permanent. Notice how identities calcify. I'm bad at math, they're my enemy. And playfully ask, says who? The goal isn't to escape reality, but to engage it more likely, like a dancer who knows the floor will hold them. In a world where even leisure is optimized and every opinion weaponized, Xuanqi's laughter echoes across millennia. Why so serious? The butterfly never asks for permission to be, neither should you. The modern pursuit of happiness often resembles a frantic race, more wealth, more pleasure, more accolades. Yet the ancient Greek philosopher Epicurus proposed a radical counterpoint. True contentment lies not in accumulation, but in subtraction. His famous garden, where disciples gathered to discuss philosophy over simple meals, became a living experiment in the art of enough. Unlike the caricature of hedonism later attached to his name, Epicurus taught that pleasure's highest form was ataraxia, freedom from disturbance, achieved by mastering desires rather than indulging them. In an age of algorithmic consumerism and infinite scrolling, his distinction between natural and vain desires offers a scalpel to dissect our own discontent. Consider the modern malaise of burnout, where exhaustion masquerades as virtue. Epicurus would diagnose this as a confusion of categories. His taxonomy of needs was ruthlessly practical. Food, shelter, friendship, and freedom from fear constitute the bedrock of happiness. Everything else is negotiable. This isn't asceticism, but precision, a recognition that the chase for superfluities inevitably crowds out the space for joy. To the tech executive working 80-hour weeks to afford a third vacation home might, upon reflection, find more pleasure in the uncluttered hours of a quiet afternoon. Yet Epicurus's most provocative insight concerns the paradox of choice. Where contemporary culture equates freedom with limitless options, he warned that every unfulfilled desire becomes a shackle. The man who upgrades his phone monthly doesn't own his device, it owns him. Its inevitable obsolescence, a preordained disappointment. This aligns eerily with modern psychology's findings on the hedonic treadmill, where gains in comfort yield diminishing returns. Epicurus's remedy was deliberate constraint, cultivating a taste for simple pleasures, sunlight on skin, laughter with friends, that require no purchase and defy depreciation. His philosophy was an anti-materialist but anti-fragile, designed to thrive even when the markets crash. Critics might dismiss this as privilege, a philosopher's luxury unavailable to those struggling for survival. But Epicurus, writing in a world of slavery and war, aimed his teachings precisely at the vulnerable. His insistence that friendship outweighs wealth wasn't platitude, but strategy. Mutual aid networks, he argued, provide security no vault can match. Even his notorious dismissal of romantic love, never marry, stemmed from observing how domestic entanglements could trap the poor in dependency. The modern parallel? The gig worker, lured into debt by buy now, pay later schemes, might find more agency in Epicurus's calculus. Fewer subscriptions, deeper bonds than in any union's demands. The true test of Epicureanism lies in its confrontation with mortality. His famous dictum, "Death is nothing to us," wasn't bravado, but logical conclusion. Since sensation seizes at death, fearing it is as irrational as fearing the time before birth. Modern anxiety clinics, with their flowcharts of catastrophic thinking, echo this stance. Suffering arises not from events, but from our judgments about them. Epicurus took this further, suggesting that confronting death's inevitability paradoxically amplifies life's sweetness. Like a traveler savoring a final sunset, this isn't nihilism, but focus. A redirecting of attention from hypothetical futures to tangible presence. To practice Epicureanism today is not to renounce modernity, but to interrogate it. Begin by auditing desires. Which are natural, hydration, which necessary, basic healthcare, and which vain, designer war. Practice negative visualization, imagining the loss of comfort to rekindle gratitude for their presence. Most radically, schedule idleness, an hour with no goal beyond watching clouds or listening to rain. Activities Epicurus considered kin to the divine. In a world that monetizes our dissatisfaction, his garden endured as an invitation. Happiness isn't a destination to reach, but a habit to cultivate, and the richest life might just be the one that needs the least. In the cacophony of modern life, where notifications fracture attention, crises loom in headlines, and the self is commodified into a brand, philosophy offers not just reflection, but refuge. Far from an ivory tower indulgence, it is a survival kick for the soul, equipping us with mental frameworks to navigate uncertainty without collapsing into anxiety or cynicism. The ancients understood this intimately. Their treatises were not abstract musings, but field manuals for living, tested in the crucibles of war, plague, and political upheaval. to real philosophy today is to reclaim that urgency, transforming timeless principles into daily practices that anchor us in chaos. Consider the simple act of waking to a barrage of bad news. A Stoic might begin with premeditatio malur, visualizing worst-case scenarios not to induce fear but to disarm their power. By mentally rehearsing loss or failure, we inoculate ourselves against the paralysis of surprise, recognizing that resilience lies in preparation, not prediction. Meanwhile, a Taoist would laugh at the illusion of control, noting how our frantic scrolling mirrors a drowning man clutching at waves. These approaches aren't contradictory, but complementary. One fortifies the mind, the other loosens its grip, together creating a balance between agency and acceptance. The goal isn't to eliminate stress, but to metabolize it, as trees convert carbon dioxide into oxygen. Ethics, too, becomes tangible when philosophy descends from theory to habit. Confucius's insistence on ritual, small, repeated acts of respect, finds modern expression in the deliberate pause before responding to a provocation, or the choice to thank a barista by name. These micro-practices accumulate into moral muscle memory, shaping character as surely as daily exercise shapes the body. Even existentialism's weighty questions, does life have meaning, yield practical answers. We create purpose through commitments, whether to a craft, a cause, or a community. The parent reading bedtime stories, the volunteer planting trees, these are philosophers in action, answering nihilism not with words but with deeds. Technology, often blamed for our disquiet, can also serve as a philosophical tool when wielded with intentionality. Epicurus' advice to hide thy life, avoiding public spectacle, translates to digital minimalism, curating feeds to nourish rather than deplete, or scheduling screen sabbats to reclaim uninterrupted thought. Shuangxi's butterfly might inspire us to occasionally anonymize ourselves online, shedding the performative self to wander the digital woods incognito. These aren't rejections of modernity, but recalibrations, aligning tools with human flourishing rather than corporate algorithms. The same devices that breed distraction can host meditation apps, philosophy podcasts, or journals, turning pockets into portable monasteries. The true measure of philosophy's utility lies in its capacity to transform suffering. When grief strikes, the Buddhist concept of anicca, impermanence, softens the edges of loss, while Kierkegaard's leap of faith validates the ache of uncertainty without demanding false certainty. Even Nietzsche's amor fati, love of fate, can reframe setbacks as necessary plot twists in one's heroic narrative. These aren't platitudes but psychological technologies forged in the fires of lived anguish. To dismiss them is to choose pain without meaning, like refusing a map in a labyrinth. To integrate philosophy into daily life requires no grand gestures, only consistent, quiet attention. Keep a wisdom ledger to jot insights from readings, then revisit them during moments of decision. Designate a philosopher's walk where, undistracted, you dissect a single idea. Montesquieu did this daily in his garden. When overwhelmed, ask, what would X advise? Substituting X for Seneca, Simon Weil, or whichever thinker resonates. Over time, these fragments coalesce into a personal ethos, a compass more reliable than mood or circumstance. In the end, philosophy's greatest gift is the dismantling of false binaries between thought and action, ancient and modern, sacred and secular. It reveals that reading Marcus Aurelius on the subway is as pragmatic as checking the weather. Peace isn't found in escaping the world, but in engaging it with clearer eyes. And the tools for that clarity have waited centuries, dusty but undimmed, for our hands to grasp them.